Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about traveling. We are going to look at Samuel Johnson's advice on how to travel and most importantly, how according to him we should do travel vlogging. LinkedIn tells us that currently there are around 50 million travel vloggers, mostly on YouTube. If you have any doubt, you can just enter in the search bar of YouTube travel vlog and see for yourself that the day might end. In fact, the week might end, but the recommendations will keep on increasing. We have a natural curiosity to know. When we read history, we travel in history. We get to know more about how people lived, what was their culture, and how they went about organizing their social and political life in general. We try to analyze and dissect the different contours of their ways of life and learn lessons from our readings. But when we pick up a travel book, especially if it had been written contemporaneously, then we expect to know, if not more, then at least the same as we learn from the history books. But since our times, words in books have been replaced by videos on our screens, those whose interests lie in becoming a travel vlogger should adapt the principles of travel writing to video making. Nonetheless, this advice of adaptation is not concerning the quality of video making. It does not concern the equipment with which the video is made. It concerns the content of the video or the book that gives information to the audience about the visited place. There are two kinds of travelers. One who travel to enjoy for themselves, not caring much about what to tell others regarding their travels. They may have a sharp, attentive mind to cultural details, but they want to enhance their own knowledge mostly. To the second kind belongs travelers who leave their home with the purpose of telling others what they saw. The 50 million travel vloggers that we talked about a bit earlier belong to the second category, and Samuel Johnson wants to address them. Samuel Johnson remained a traveler all throughout his life. He did not travel because he was tired of his home and just wanted to escape his daily routine. On the contrary, he always traveled with purpose, often recounting his reflections in books, essays, and poems while traveling and after returning home. Amongst his traveling books are included A Voyage to Abyssinia, published in 1735, which is actually a translation of a book written by a French traveler, later followed by a much more successful and interesting book entitled A Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland, published in 1775, which records the famous journey he took to the Western Isles with Boswell. Johnson travelled extensively throughout England, France, and North Wales regularly. And as said earlier, apart from the books written on this subject, he also wrote essays on it. Since travelling is something very common, we do not pay attention to the fact that we might have to learn how to travel. And this is what Johnson reminds us of every time we read him on traveling. And after having read his books on traveling, we also realize, how did we not notice these things? Where were our eyes and mind while traveling? Of course, there is a remarkable difference in the means of travels between us and Johnson. At that time, it took months to reach from one city to the other. Now it takes hours. Traveling was not an easy task to do in the 18th century, and precisely because of these difficulties that we see often mentioned in travel writing before the invention of commercial airplanes, we get a different perspective of traveling and looking at the world. So now let's turn to the great sage of travel writing and learn how to travel and most importantly, what to pay attention to while traveling with the purpose of teaching others. Johnson wrote an essay entitled Narratives of Travellers Considered, which was published in The Idler in February 1760. As we discussed in the last video regarding Johnson, that he considered it to be his task to correct the moral wrongs of his times. He was the doctor of literature. So he had to put straight a few writers who had started to fill the bookshelves of the bookstores with the records of traveling. So let's ask him what is the problem with these books. Mind you, if Johnson were alive today, we would have him making videos on YouTube correcting other vloggers. Therefore, we all can look into the mirror and check for ourselves where do we stand in the eyes of this genius. So, doctor, you are primarily known for your strict moral stature among the writers. What is the problem with these travel books? Why are you so disappointed with them? He has his own way of introduction. He does not spend long paragraphs introducing the problems and challenges of traveling and travel writing. He is writing this essay for Edison's Daily The Idler. Therefore, the audience reading this article want to get straight to the point. They have enough headache from the prolonged argument from politicians and the fighting going all over the world that they have read in the newspapers. So, to the point, Johnson does get. He begins as if we are in the middle of the conversation. Quote open. It may, I think, be justly observed that few books disappoint their readers more than the narrations of travelers. One part of mankind is naturally curious to learn the sentiments, manners, and condition of the rest. And every mind that has leisure or power to extend its views must be desirous of knowing in what proportion Providence has distributed the blessings of nature or the advantages of art among the several nations of the earth. Quote close. Aristotle said that human is a political animal. He meant it literally. So we have to first dust off the linguistic baggage that has been accumulating throughout the past 2 millennia. Politics comes from the Greek word polis, which can be very loosely translated as community or city-state. So when he said that human is a political animal, he meant that humans live in communities and necessarily they live in communities. That is to say that without communities, a human being cannot survive. But is man only a political animal? Humans are equally rational beings as well, and they by nature desire to know. Here Johnson points out both of these qualities and uses them to explain his disappointment. The reason why Johnson considers these travel books to be a disappointment is because these books do not satisfy the curiosity of our intellect. And it is one of our basic curiosity. How do other people live in their communities? Traveling allows us the chance to glimpse into the changes brought about by the changes in territory that force the community to organize their society differently. And this difference of sentiments and manners are of tantamount importance for those who want to expand their wisdom. The mention of providence is equally important in this scenario because we do not decide where we are born. Therefore, we must acknowledge that though many things seem natural to us while living in our communities, but they are absolutely unimaginable for people living in other communities. Okay, doc, but given your description, are not these differences apparent to the naked eye? Everyone can see them and identify the differences. So why do these travel books and vlogs disappoint us? A sarcastic laugh appears on Johnson's face as he explains the following. Quote open. This general desire easily procures readers to every book from which it can expect gratification. The adventurer upon unknown coasts and the describer of distant regions is always welcomed as a man who has labored for the pleasure of others and who is able to enlarge our knowledge and rectify our opinions. But when the volume is opened, nothing is found but general accounts as leave no distinct idea behind them, or such minute enumeration as few can read with either profit or delight. Quote close. He does not shy away from explaining the truth that even though we all come to the travel books or in our day travel vlogs with the expectation that there would be something interesting in it, something different, because that is what is expected from a different country or different landscape. But this difference that we assume and expect is completely missing. Once a man came to Socrates, whose friend had recently come back from travel. He said to Socrates that his friend had traveled this place and that place, but as soon as he returned back, he had the same anguished demeanor as before. Why? Socrates said that since he went with himself and his self had these anxieties all throughout the journey, it is him who lived here and it is him who traveled to foreign lands and it is the same him who had returned with all its anxieties etched upon his self. Our purpose of traveling is usually to take a break from our daily life routine. We consider ourselves to have a different perspective, a different sort of mind, so to say, simply because we are on a different land. Johnson and Socrates have clarified this misconception. To open our eyes and look at the world is an art that must be achieved. And these travel writers do not possess this art, according to them. What they do is that they take their own prejudices and prejudgments from their own homeland to a foreign land and then write a book about that place that any person would have written after having read other travel books. Yes, Doc understood. We are all disappointed reading these travel books and watching these vlogs. What exactly are they missing? How can these travel writers and vloggers infuse their content with meaning? What should they do? Please tell us. Looking at us with a thoughtful gaze and searching through his experience of travel writing, he exclaims, quote open, every writer of travel should consider that like all other authors, he undertakes either to instruct or please, or to mingle pleasure with instruction. He that instructs must offer to the mind something to be imitated or something to be avoided. He that pleases must offer new images to his reader and enable him to form a tacit comparison of his own state with that of others. Quote close. So now we have the true principles on which each travel book or vlog should be based. It should either instruct or please or do both. With regards to instruction, he explains that it must be something moral because when he says that it must demonstrate something that should be imitated or avoided, he is following the moral tenets explained by the empiricists. According to Locke, everything either gives pleasure or pain, and whatever gives pleasure is imitated, and whatever gives pain is avoided. At the back of Johnson's mind is this moral dichotomy. When he comes to explaining pleasure, he explains that it is not just to laugh off at the stupidities of foreigners. That is not pleasure. That is an abhorrent attitude. The traveler must acquaint himself with the art of finding novelty, not according to his own country's standards, but that of an objective observer. Furthermore, the traveler must also keep a close eye out on the details of comparison. He must present to his countrymen a standard with which they could judge their own country. And this comparison must not be of the haughty nature that we have this and we have that, and they have this and they have that. The main purpose is to find the reasons, whether they be political, social, or cultural, for these differences. A person may be poor because he lost all his money on a bet. On the other hand, a person may be poor because his government does not consider him a citizen and perhaps even commit a genocide against him. The motivations of the state matter. The culture and religion of that state also matter. And equally, the character, language, and intentions of citizens also matter in deciding the fate of a country. They must be presented in a detached manner such that the audience actually learn from the traveler and not just inflate their own prejudices against the other. But again, dear doctor, you have told us about the disease common amongst travelers. We are more interested in the cause of this disease. Who can deny the fact that, let's say, Thailand is different from India? Is not that obvious? Given this fact, what do these travelers, who by the way are interested in telling us about these differences, lack? What is missing in their method? Johnson would be now prepared to break silence upon this issue. We have pressed him enough. Without further delay, he explains. Quote open. The great part of travelers tell nothing because their method of traveling supplies them with nothing to be told. He that enters a town at night and surveys it in the morning, and then hastens away to another place and guesses at the manners of the inhabitants by the entertainment which his inn afforded him, may please himself for a time with a hasty change of scene and a confused remembrances of palaces and churches. He may gratify his eye with a variety of landscapes and regale his palate with a succession of vintages. But let him be contented to please himself without endeavoring to disturb others. Quote close. According to this sage, the problem is twofold. Firstly, the problem lies in the way these travelers approach traveling. And secondly, they are too self centered. We have to again remind ourselves that this is the era when traveling by our standards was very slow paced. Nonetheless, Johnson complains that haste kills close observation, and therefore it also impedes the acquisition of knowledge. We are usually obsessed with seeing more rather than observing more. Whenever we visit a new country, we are more interested in visiting the tourist places. In fact, we prefer to get on this hop on, hop off bus and complete the guided tour as soon as possible so that we can tell, yes, we visited Paris, we visited the Louvre, we visited l'Arc de Triomphe, we visited le Moulin Rouge, we visited Rue de Montparnasse, and the list goes on. But if somebody cares to stop this visitor for a bit and demand, did you manage to observe the master stroke of proportionality in Da Vinci's Mona Lisa? He would squirm and be annoyed, and perhaps even say, who does that? But for Johnson, that is precisely what we have to do. We have to look at the world with a keen eye, and this does not hold true only for traveling, this equally holds true for our home country. We need to observe and not just look, because it is in studies of the details of the veins of a leaf we find the difference. Otherwise, every leaf is just a leaf. Not knowing and never wanting to know and never being able to know that no two leaves, just like no two eyes, are the same. The second problem is related to the first. Since we are more concerned about telling others that we can outwit the other by claiming that since we have visited Paris, we know more about it. But whenever a reader of Balzac, who unfortunately did not get the chance to visit Paris, inquires this visitor about the arches of the windows and walls, he would be put to shame because the reader knows more about Paris without visiting the city than the visitor himself. Therefore, our purpose of travel must change from self-conceit to acquisition of knowledge, being humble. We must travel with the purpose of first of all learning for ourselves and secondly, again for learning for ourselves. Once someone learns the language himself, it is very easy to teach others. One can never teach others if one has merely glimpsed over the textbook just because he had the money to buy one. There are many ways to gain pleasure for oneself. But if the purpose is, as is the purpose of travel vloggers, to teach others, then pleasure must be traded with close, painstaking observation. Here Johnson steals the words from our lips and expresses the astonishment himself while asking the fundamental question. Quote open. Why should he record excursions by which nothing could be learned? Or wish to make a show of knowledge, which, without some power of intuition unknown to other mortals, he never could attain. Quote close. And while we are just about to intervene with the proposition, he hits us with a long answer, something that would really make us all think deeply and look at ourselves again in the mirror. He exclaims with a fury. Quote open. Of those who crowd the world with their itineraries, some have no other purpose than to describe the face of the country. Those who sit idle at home and are curious to know what is done or suffered in distant countries may be informed by one of these wanderers that on a certain day he set out early with a caravan, and in the first hour's march saw towards the south a hill covered with trees, then passed over a stream which ran northward with a swift course, but which is probably dry in the summer months. That an hour after he saw something to the right which looked at a distance like a castle with towers, but which he discovered afterwards to be a craggy rock. That he then entered a valley in which he saw several trees tall and flourishing, watered by a rivulet not marked in the maps, of which he was not able to learn the name. That the road afterward grew stony, and the country uneven, where he observed among the hills many hollows worn by torrents, and was told that the road was passable only part of the year. That going on, they found the remains of a building, once perhaps a fortress, to secure the pass or to restrain the robbers, of which the present inhabitants can give no other account than that it is haunted by fairies. That they went to dine at the foot of a rock and travelled the rest of the day along the banks of a river from which the road turned aside towards evening and brought them within sight of a village which was once a considerable town, but which afforded them neither good victuals nor commodious lodging. Quote close. Well, he lost it finally. But good that he lost it. Now we know what troubles him. It is not that the traveler does not look for novelties. On the contrary, he looks for the novelties that may only interest him, and trying too much always gets us nowhere. It is not that we should work too hard, but that we should work smartly. For those who make travel vlogs and write travel books, it is work for them. Therefore, it is really important that the information that they are displaying are of their own choice. It is the things that they found interesting. But the audience is not merely interested in watching or reading facts. They want to know the history, the cultural motivation for the creation of the temples and churches. They want to see why all this is in that country and not in ours, and what difference does it make in the historical process of cultural and social creation of the nation between the two places. Here, Johnson would stop us because he is not done shouting at these people. He continues, quote opening. Thus, he conducts his readers through wet and dry, over rough and smooth, without incidents, without reflection. And if he obtains his company for another day, will dismiss him again at night, equally fatigued with the like succession of rocks and streams, mountains and ruins. Quote close. Okay, Doc, is that it? Like, can we move on and discuss something other than these disappointments that you have found in these books, or you will continue? With a wave of hand shutting us down, he goes on. Quote open. This is the common style of those sons of enterprise who visit savage countries and range through solitude and desolation, who pass a desert and tell that it is sandy, who cross a valley and find that it is green. There are others of more delicate sensibility that visit only the realms of elegance and softness, that wander through Italian palaces and amuse the gentle reader with catalogues of pictures, that hear masses in magnificent churches and recount the number of the pillars and variations of the pavement. And there are yet others who, in disdain of trifles, copy inscriptions elegant and rude, ancient and modern, and transcribe into their book the walls of every edifice, sacred or civil. He that reads these books must consider his labor as its own reward, for he will find nothing on which attention can fix or which memory can retain. Quote close. Johnson is relentless. He hardly stops his wit when it is at work, and it is a pleasure to read his anger. The words that he uses, the way he places one disappointment after the other, the manner in which he includes his witty remarks popping up here and there in a fit of calm rage. All these are the hallmarks of a first-rate satirist. We hang our heads down. We got him started. But he is all smiles. Looking at us tired and scared of his witty rage, he knows that he must give one piece of advice and concludes with the following words. Quote open. He that would travel for the entertainment of others should remember that the great object of remark is human life. Every nation has something peculiar in its manufactures, its works of genius, its medicines, its agriculture, its customs, and its policy. He only is a useful traveler who brings home something by which his country may be benefited, who procures some supply of want or some mitigation of evil which may enable his readers to compare their condition with that of others, to improve it whenever it is worse, and whenever it is better, to enjoy it. Quote close. These words must be etched in the hearts of each one of us, especially those who travel a lot. Thank you, everyone.